The blue light from the communication array cast long shadows across the console chamber as Vextal pressed his six-fingered hand against the control panel. His pale green skin trembled with fear as he looked at the other council members. Their large black eyes reflected the same terror that gripped his heart. "Are we certain about this decision?" asked Melkor, her voice barely above a whisper. The elderly Zolarian's head tentacles swayed nervously as she spoke. Calling for help from an unknown species could bring more danger. Vextal stared at the tactical display showing red dots advancing toward their home system. The Krex Empire had already destroyed 12 Zolarian colonies. 40 billion innocent lives hung in the balance. The peaceful plant eaters had no weapons that could stop the advancing war machine. "We have no choice," Vextal said firmly. "Our defense fleet was destroyed at Kepler Station. The Krex will reach Zeller Prime in 8 rotations. We must send the message." The database showed a species listed as Terrans from the 3rd planet of a yellow star system. According to their limited information, these beings were young and peaceful. They had only recently developed faster-than-light communication. Perfect allies for a desperate situation. "Send the transmission," Vextal ordered. The message traveled through space faster than light, crossing thousands of star systems in minutes. It carried the desperate plea of a dying civilization to what they believed were kindred spirits. The Zolarians had no idea they were about to contact the most dangerous species in the galaxy. On Earth, Admiral Jake Morrison sat in his office at Pacific Fleet Command, reviewing the morning reports. The coffee in his mug had gone cold hours ago, but he barely noticed. At 52 years old, Morrison had seen enough military action to last several lifetimes. His weathered face showed the stress of commanding Earth's largest naval force. Communication alarm shattered the quiet morning. Morrison's aide, Lieutenant Danny Chen, burst through the door with wide eyes. "Sir, you need to see this immediately," Danny said, his voice shaking with excitement. "We're receiving a transmission." "From outside the solar system," Morrison raised an eyebrow. "Outside the solar system? Are you certain?" "Yes, sir. Dr. Lisa Grant from the Xenolinguistics Department is already working on translation. She says it's definitely alien in origin." Morrison followed Danny down the corridor to the communication center. The room buzzed with activity as dozens of technicians worked at their stations. Dr. Grant stood before a large screen, displaying strange symbols that shifted and changed as her computer systems processed them. "Admiral," Dr. Grant said without looking away from her work, "this is incredible. The message contains mathematical proofs and star charts. It's definitely from an advanced civilization." "What are they saying?" Morrison asked. Dr. Grant's fingers flew across her keyboard as the translation software worked through the alien language. "It's a distress call, sir. They're asking for help." The translation appeared on the screen in broken English as the computer struggled with concepts that had no human equivalent. Morrison read the words with growing concern. "Peaceful species of Terra, we beg for assistance. The Krex Empire destroys our worlds. 40 billion souls face extinction. We are plant eaters with no weapons. Please help us. We will share knowledge and resources. Time grows short. Please respond." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the message. Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. These aliens were facing genocide, and they had reached out to Earth for help. "Sir," Danny said quietly, "they think we're peaceful." Morrison almost smiled at the irony. Humans had spent their entire history fighting wars. Earth itself was a death trap that had forged humanity into the ultimate survivors. Storms that could level cities, predators with claws and fangs, diseases that killed millions, natural disasters that reshaped continents. Humans had survived it all and learned to fight back against everything that tried to kill them. Captain Ryan Torres entered the communication center with quick steps. The younger officer commanded the USS Vengeance, Earth's most advanced warship. His dark eyes burned with intensity as he read the translated message. "Admiral, we have to help them," Ryan said firmly. 40 billion innocent lives. "It could be a trap," warned General Pete Campbell as he joined the group. The Army commander's gray hair and scarred hands spoke of decades in combat zones. "We know nothing about these aliens or their enemies." Dr. Grant looked up from her computer. "The mathematical proofs check out, General. The star charts match. Our astronomical data. This appears genuine." Morrison studied the message again. The aliens called themselves Zilarians. They described their enemy as the Krex Empire, a militaristic species that conquered worlds for resources. The Zilarians were herbivores with no military tradition. They were being slaughtered by predators who saw them as easy prey. "How long do we have?" Morrison asked. "According to their time measurements, about 6 days before the enemy reaches their homeworld," Dr. Grant replied. Morrison made his decision. "Contact President Sullivan immediately. Tell her we have a situation that requires the highest level authorization." Within 2 hours, President Katie Sullivan stood in the White House Situation Room surrounded by her top military advisors. The alien message played on the main screen as she absorbed the implications. "Madam President," Morrison said, "these people are facing extinction. They've asked for our help." President Sullivan was quiet for a long moment. At 45, she was the youngest president in American history. She had built her career on making tough decisions under pressure. This decision would be the toughest of all. "They think we're peaceful," she said finally. "Yes, ma'am," Morrison replied. "They have no idea what kind of species they've contacted." Sullivan looked around the room at her advisors. "Recommendations?" "We mobilize everything," said Secretary of Defense John Parker. "If we're going to do this, we do it right. The risks are enormous," warned CIA Director Carol White. "We're talking about revealing our military capabilities to unknown alien civilizations." President Sullivan stood and walked to the window overlooking the Rose Garden. She thought about humanity's long history of violence and survival. Humans had clawed their way to the top of Earth's food chain through pure stubbornness and superior firepower. Now aliens who knew nothing about human nature were asking for protection. "These Zilarians made a mistake," Sullivan said quietly. "They think they called for help from gentle neighbors. Instead, they've contacted the descendants of apex predators from a world that tried to kill us for millions of years." She turned back to face the room. "But that mistake might just save their lives. Admiral Morrison, prepare the fleet. We're going to show this Krex Empire what happens when you threaten innocent people in front of humans." Morrison saluted. "Yes, Madam President." "What are our rules of engagement?" Sullivan's expression hardened. "Overwhelming force. These aliens asked the wrong species for help, but they're going to get exactly what they need." The message had been sent to peaceful Terrans. Instead, it had reached the most efficient killers in the galaxy. The Zilarians' mistake was about to change the course of galactic history. The massive hangar bay at Norfolk Naval Base had never seen activity like this before. Admiral Morrison walked between rows of starships as crews loaded weapons and supplies with desperate speed. The largest human fleet in history was taking shape before his eyes. Captain Alex Turner saluted as Morrison approached the USS Liberty. The flagship stretched nearly 2 kilometers long, its hull bristling with weapon systems that most alien species had never imagined. Turner was young for a ship captain at 38, but his record in the Mars conflict had earned him command of humanity's most advanced vessel. "Status report, Captain," Morrison ordered. "All primary systems online, sir. Weapons loaded and tested. We can launch in 18 hours, Turner replied. His crew worked around him, checking every system twice. They knew this mission would be unlike anything humans had attempted before. Morrison nodded and continued his inspection. The fleet included 300 ships of various sizes. Destroyers built for speed and striking power. Cruisers designed to take punishment and keep fighting. Carriers loaded with fighter craft that could operate in any environment. And the experimental vessels that made this fleet truly terrifying. Colonel Maria Santos supervised the loading of ground troops onto the transport ships. At 42, she had led soldiers through every major conflict of the past decade. Her Marines respected her because she never asked them to do anything she wouldn't do herself. "How many troops are we taking?" Morrison asked as he approached. Her position: 50,000 combat soldiers, sir. Plus support personnel, Santos replied. Every one of them volunteered when they heard about the mission. Morrison wasn't surprised. Humans had always responded to calls for help, especially when children were in danger. The thought of 40 billion innocent beings facing extinction had motivated every person in the fleet. Dr. Ben Parker worked frantically in his xenobiology lab aboard the USS Liberty. The scientist had spent his career studying theoretical alien life forms. Now he faced the reality of two actual alien species, one peaceful and one hostile. "What can you tell me about our enemies?" Morrison asked as he entered the lab. Parker looked up from his computer screens filled with data about the Krex Empire. "They're fascinating from a scientific standpoint, sir. Standard gravity world, oxygen breathers like us. But they evolved as pack hunters on a relatively easy world." "Easy world?" Morrison questioned. "Compared to Earth, yes, sir. Lower gravity, stable climate, no major predators. They developed intelligence and technology, but they never faced the survival pressures that shaped human evolution." Morrison understood the implications immediately. Humans had evolved on a world that actively tried to kill them. Every storm, every predator, every disease had made humanity stronger and more adaptable. These Krex had never faced such challenges, Lieutenant. Commander Sam Brooks ran the intelligence section with quiet efficiency. His team had intercepted dozens of Krex communications since the fleet began preparing. The enemy messages painted a clear picture of their expectations. "Sir, the Krex are completely unprepared for us," Brooks reported. "Their communications indicate they expect to face a small diplomatic mission. They have no idea what human military doctrine looks like. What are their numbers?" Morrison asked. "Over 800 ships in the attacking fleet, sir. But their vessels are built for intimidation and occupation, not serious combat. Their weapons are designed to disable and capture, not destroy." Morrison processed this information. The Krex had built their empire by overwhelming peaceful species with superior numbers and technology. They had never faced an enemy that fought back with the brutal efficiency of apex predators. Meanwhile, in the Zalarian home system, panic gripped the population. Ambassador Thelmore stood in the emergency council chamber, reading the latest messages. From the mysterious Terrans. "They say they are coming with a military fleet," Thelmore announced to the terrified council members. 300 warships. The Zalarians looked at each other with growing fear. Their database had indicated the Terrans were peaceful plant-eaters like themselves. This sounded more like a military invasion than a rescue mission. "Perhaps we made an error in judgment," whispered Council Member Jinval. "What if these Terrans are as dangerous as the Krex?" Thelmore had been thinking the same thing. The human messages were polite, but carried an undertone of barely controlled violence. They spoke of bringing overwhelming force and showing the Krex what happens when innocents are threatened. This didn't sound like the language of peaceful beings. Back on Earth, Captain Nicole Davis worked to establish better communication with the frightened Zalarians. As the fleet's diplomatic officer, she tried to reassure them while preparing for the reality of first contact. "The Zalarians are terrified of us," Davis reported to Morrison. "They keep asking if we're really coming to help or if we're another invasion force." Morrison understood their fear. Humans probably seemed like monsters to a species that had never known violence. But right now, Monsters were exactly what the Zalorians needed. The experimental weapons made the human fleet truly unique. Dr. Sarah Kim supervised the loading of kinetic bombardment platforms onto the heavy cruisers. These weapons could drop tungsten rods from orbit with the force of nuclear weapons, but without the radiation. The galaxy has never seen weapons like these, Kim explained to Morrison. Most species develop energy weapons or missiles. Only humans thought to simply drop really heavy things really fast. The nuclear arsenal represented humanity's most terrifying capability. While other species had developed atomic technology for power generation, humans had immediately weaponized it. The fleet carried enough nuclear warheads to glass entire worlds. Captain Bob Rivers commanded one of the stealth ships, vessels that existed only because humans had learned to hide from predators before they learned to hunt them. His ship could become invisible to most sensor systems, allowing it to strike without warning. "The Kreks won't know what hit them," Rivers told his crew as they prepared for departure. "They're used to fighting opponents who announce their presence and try to negotiate. We're going to teach them about human tactical doctrine." As the final preparations continued, Morrison received regular updates from his captains. Every ship reported ready for combat. Every weapon system had been tested and certified. The soldiers were eager to fight for beings they had never met, but already considered worth protecting. The irony wasn't lost on Morrison. The Zalarians had sent their distress call to what they believed were gentle souls who would offer peaceful assistance. Instead, they had contacted a species forged by millions of years of warfare and survival on the most dangerous planet in their local galactic region. But perhaps that mistake would save them. The Kreks Empire had built their power by conquering species that couldn't fight back effectively. They had never faced humans before. They had never encountered beings who treated warfare as a science and violence as an art form. The fleet would launch in 12 hours. The Zalarians' call for help was about to be answered by the most dangerous military force the galaxy had ever seen. The peaceful plant eaters had no idea they were about to witness what happened when apex predators decided to protect the innocent. The space around Zeller Prime looked like a scene from hell. Kreks warships hung in formation around the planet, their dark hulls blocking out the stars. Admiral Vorthcan stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching his forces prepare for the final assault. 800 ships against a defenseless world. It would be over in hours. "Sir, we're detecting hyperspace signatures," his sensor officer reported. "Multiple contacts approaching from the outer system." Vorthcan's 4 eyes narrowed as he studied the tactical display. "How many ships?" "Difficult to determine, sir. The signatures are unlike anything in our database. Estimate between 200 and 300 vessels." The Kreks admiral felt a moment of uncertainty. The Zalarians had no allies. Their pathetic defense fleet had been destroyed weeks ago. Who could be coming to help them? "Signal the fleet," Vorthcan ordered. "Maintain position and prepare to engage unknown vessels." They probably sent a desperate call for help to some other weak species. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty, watching the enemy ships through the main viewer. The Kreks vessels were large and imposing, designed to intimidate peaceful species into surrender. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the lead Krek ship," reported Communications Officer Lisa Park. "Put it through," Morrison ordered. The alien voice came through the speakers, translated by the ship's computer. "Unknown vessels, you are interfering with Kreks Empire military operations. Withdraw immediately or face destruction." Morrison smiled grimly. "Open a channel." "Channel open, sir." "This is Admiral Jake Morrison of the Terran Defense Fleet. You are ordered to withdraw from Zalarian space immediately. This is your only warning." On his flagship, Vorthcan laughed at the human response. "Terrans? Never heard of them." "Signal the fleet to engage." These newcomers will learn what happens when they interfere with the Krex Empire. The battle began with the Krex fleet moving forward in their traditional intimidation formation. They expected the smaller human force to retreat in terror. Instead, they received a lesson in why humans were the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Captain Danny Miller commanded the destroyer squadron on the human fleet's right flank. His ships were built for speed and hitting power, designed by engineers who understood that the best defense was killing your enemy before they could kill you. All ships, execute attack pattern Alpha, Miller ordered. Show them what human weapons can do. The destroyers accelerated toward the Krex formation at speeds that made the alien commanders gasp in shock. Human ships could pull maneuvers that would crush the crews of most species, but humans had evolved under crushing gravity and survived worse. The first Krex ship to fire learned why human military doctrine was so effective. Its energy beam struck the destroyer USS Ranger squarely. The human ship's shields absorbed the impact and kept coming. "Is that all they've got?" laughed Commander Tim Kelly aboard the Ranger. "Return fire, full power." The human response was devastating. Instead of the energy weapons the Krex expected, the destroyer fired kinetic rounds at incredible velocity. Tungsten slugs traveling at near light speed punched through the Krex ship like it was made of paper. The alien vessel exploded in a ball of fire and debris. "What kind of weapons are those?" Vorthkan demanded as he watched 3 more of his ships die in the first minute of battle. "Unknown, sir," his weapons officer replied with obvious fear. "They appear to be using physical projectiles at extremely high velocity. Our shields are ineffective." Captain Amy Foster commanded the Stealth Squadron, ships that existed because humans had learned to hunt and hide before they developed technology. Her vessels had crept close to the Krex formation while invisible to their sensors. "All ships, decloak and fire," Foster ordered. Suddenly 20 human ships appeared in the middle of the Krex formation. The aliens had never faced an enemy that could become invisible. Their sensors weren't designed to detect ships that didn't want to be found. The stealth ships opened fire at point-blank range. Krex vessels exploded all around them as human weapons found their targets. The aliens tried to return fire, but the human ships were already moving, dancing between the larger enemy vessels with impossible grace. Major Tim Kelly led the first boarding action when his Marines breached a damaged Krex cruiser. The aliens inside had never faced humans in close combat. They discovered why humans were the ultimate soldiers. The Krex were strong and well-armed, but they had evolved on an easy world. They had never learned to fight with the desperate fury of apex predators. Kelly's Marines moved through the ship like a force of nature, overwhelming the defenders with superior tactics and raw aggression. "These aliens are tough," Kelly reported over the comm, "but they fight like they expect their enemies to play fair." Bad mistake. The Krex bridge crew watched in horror as boarding pods launched from human ships and punched through their hulls. The aliens inside those ships screamed over the communication channels as human soldiers showed them what close combat looked like to a species that had survived by killing everything that threatened them. Commander Luke Hayes coordinated the rescue operations as human ships broke through the Krex blockade around Zeller Prime. Zellarian civilian ships had been hiding in the planet's shadow, waiting for the final assault that would end their civilization. "This is Commander Hayes of the Terran Fleet," he broadcast to the terrified Zellarians. "We're here to help. Move your ships away from the planet. We're going to clear out these Krex for you." The Zellarians watched in amazement as human ships carved through the enemy formation. They had expected gentle beings who would try to negotiate peace. Instead, they were witnessing the most one-sided military defeat in galactic history. Admiral Vorthkan realized his mistake too late. These weren't peaceful diplomats or weak allies of the Zellarians. These were predators from a world that had forged them into the perfect killing machines. His formation was collapsing as human ships destroyed his vessels faster than he could. "Count them. All ships retreat," he ordered. "Fall back to the hyperspace limit." But the humans weren't finished. Captain Alex Turner pursued the fleeing Krek ships with ruthless efficiency. Human doctrine didn't allow enemies to escape and regroup. When humans went to war, they finished it. "Don't let them get away," Turner ordered his squadron. "Make sure they understand what happens when they threaten innocent people." The running battle continued for 2 hours as human ships hunted down the scattered Krek's fleet. By the time it ended, over 600 enemy vessels had been destroyed or captured. The rest fled into hyperspace, carrying word of the terrifying new species that had entered galactic affairs. Admiral Morrison watched the tactical display as the last Krek ships disappeared. The battle had been completely one-sided. Human casualties were minimal, while the enemy had been virtually annihilated. "Signal the Zalarian government," Morrison ordered. "Tell them the immediate threat has been neutralized." On Zeller Prime, the population celebrated their miraculous salvation. But the celebration was mixed with fear. The beings who had saved them were clearly not the peaceful species they had expected. The Zalarians had called for help from gentle neighbors and instead received aid from the most efficient killers in the galaxy. The mistake that brought humans into galactic affairs had saved 40 billion lives. But it had also introduced a new player to the cosmic stage, one whose methods would change everything about how wars were fought among the stars. The Zalarian Council Chamber had never hosted aliens before. Ambassador Thelmore nervously adjusted his ceremonial robes as he waited for the human delegation to arrive. The beings who had saved his people were coming to their planet, and he had no idea what to expect. Dr. Carol Stone stepped off the human shuttle and immediately felt the difference. The gravity on Zeller Prime was barely half of Earth's crushing pull. The air was thin and sweet, lacking the harsh bite of oxygen that human lungs were used to. Even the sunlight felt gentle compared to the radiation that bathed Earth. "Fascinating," Stone murmured to her assistant, Dr. Mark Wilson. "This world is like a paradise compared to home." Captain Bob Rivers and a security team flanked the scientists as they walked toward the Zalarian government building. The human soldiers moved with the easy confidence of apex predators, but their presence terrified the local population. Word had spread about what these beings had done to the Krek's fleet. Inside the council chamber, Thelmore tried to hide his fear as the humans entered. They were smaller than he had expected, but there was something about the way they moved that made his skin crawl. These beings radiated controlled violence even when they were trying to be peaceful. "Welcome to Zeller Prime," Thelmore said formally. "We are grateful for your assistance against the Krek's empire." Dr. Stone smiled and bowed slightly. "We're honored to meet you, Ambassador. My name is Carol Stone. I'm here to establish formal diplomatic relations between our species." As the humans took their seats, Thelmore noticed how they automatically positioned themselves to watch all the exits. Their eyes constantly scanned the room, looking for threats that didn't exist. These beings lived in a state of constant alertness. "If I may ask," Thelmore said carefully, "your database entry indicated that Terrans were a peaceful species, yet your military response was quite aggressive." Dr. Stone exchanged glances with Captain Rivers. They had expected this question. "I think there may have been some confusion about our nature, Ambassador. Perhaps we should explain where we come from." Over the next hour, Stone described Earth to the horrified Zalarians. She spoke of a world where the weather could kill entire cities, where the native animals were armed with claws and fangs, where diseases had wiped out millions of humans throughout history. She explained how Earth's crushing gravity had made human bones and muscles dense and strong. "Your gravity is 2.4 times stronger than ours," Thelmore said, with growing understanding. "The atmospheric pressure is 3 times higher. Your world is a death trap." "We call it home," Stone replied simply. "Humans evolved to survive in conditions that would kill most galactic species, That's why our military is so effective. We're used to fighting for our lives. Meanwhile, in the military compound outside the city, Sergeant Tony Clark was demonstrating human physical capabilities to a group of amazed Zilarian observers. The human soldier picked up a steel beam that weighed more than most Zilarians and lifted it over his head with ease. On Earth, we call this basic physical training, Clark explained to the stunned aliens. Every human soldier can do this. It's not special for us. The Zilarians watched in terror as Clark's squad went through their regular exercise routine. The humans moved with speed and strength that seemed impossible. They could jump 3 times their own height, run for hours without stopping, and lift weights that would crush most galactic species. How do you survive on such a world? Asked one of the Zilarian scientists. We don't just survive, Clark replied. We thrive. Earth made us strong because everything on our planet tried to kill us. We learned to kill it back. In the orbital station above Zeller Prime, Admiral Morrison received intelligence reports from Commander Rachel Stone's reconnaissance units. The news was troubling. The Krex Empire was mobilizing their core fleets, preparing for a massive counterattack. Sir, we're tracking over 2,000 Krex ships moving toward this system, Stone reported. They're pulling forces from across their empire. Morrison studied the tactical data. The Krex had learned from their defeat. They were bringing overwhelming numbers to crush the human fleet, but they still didn't understand what they were facing. Signal the fleet, Morrison ordered. Begin preparations for extended combat operations. And contact Earth, we're going to need reinforcements. Back on the planet's surface, the cultural exchange continued. Zilarian scientists peppered the humans with questions about their impossible world. They couldn't understand how any species could survive on a planet that actively tried to kill its inhabitants. Your weather patterns are chaotic, observed Dr. Veltam, the Zilarian chief scientist. Storms that can destroy entire cities. How do you cope with such disasters? We build stronger cities, replied Dr. Wilson. We develop better warning systems. We prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Humans are very good at adapting to danger. The Zilarians were beginning to understand the true nature of their saviors. These weren't peaceful beings who had reluctantly taken up arms to help strangers. These were war machines shaped by millions of years of survival on the most dangerous world in their local galactic region. Captain Rivers watched the exchange with growing concern. The Zilarians were terrified of humans, and he couldn't blame them. To peaceful plant eaters, humans must seem like the stuff of nightmares. Apex predators who had learned to kill everything that threatened them. Dr. Stone, Rivers said quietly. We need to address the elephant in the room, Stone nodded. She turned to Thelmore and spoke directly. Ambassador, I can see that you're frightened of us. I want you to understand something important. Humans are dangerous, yes, but we're also fiercely protective of innocent life. We didn't come here to conquer or destroy. We came because you asked for help. Thelmore's head tentacles swayed nervously. But what happens when you leave? What if you decide our world has something you want? Then you'll have to trust us, Stone replied. Humans have a saying, with great power comes great responsibility. We know how dangerous we are. That's why we try to use our strength to protect those who can't protect themselves. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent message from the fleet. The Krex were returning with massive reinforcements. The peaceful interlude was about to end. Admiral Morrison's voice crackled over the communication system. All personnel, prepare for immediate evacuation. The Krex are coming back with everything they've got. The Zilarians looked at each other with renewed fear. Would their terrifying saviors abandon them now that the real fight was beginning? Dr. Stone stood up and straightened her uniform. Ambassador, you're about to see what happens when someone threatens people that humans have decided to protect. The Krex think they can win by bringing more ships. They're about to learn why that's not how humans fight wars. Captain Rivers was already moving toward the exit. The Kreks made their first mistake when they started this war. They're about to make their last mistake by continuing it. The humans prepared to leave the planet's surface, but not to flee. They were going back to their ships to face an enemy that still didn't understand what it meant to fight a species forged by a world that had tried to kill them for millions of years. The Zalarians watched them go, finally understanding the true nature of their mistake. They had called for help from peaceful neighbors and instead contacted the most dangerous species in the galaxy. But as terrifying as humans were, they were also the only thing standing between the Zalarians and extinction. Deathworlders were going back to war, and the galaxy was about to witness what happened when apex predators decided that someone needed protection. The space around Krex Prime burned with the fire of 1,000 dying suns. General Steve Murphy stood in the command center of the assault transport, watching his forces prepare for the final push against the enemy homeworld. The Krex had made their choice when they refused to surrender after the Battle of Zeller Prime. Now they would face the full fury of human military might. "Sir, orbital bombardment is complete," reported Captain Jenny Brooks from her command ship. "Enemy ground defenses are eliminated. We're ready for the landing." Murphy nodded grimly. The humans had learned something important during their war with the Krex Empire. When dealing with aggressive species that only understood strength, half measures were worse than useless. The Krex had interpreted human mercy as weakness and launched 3 more attacks on innocent worlds. Colonel Paul Davis led the first wave of ground forces toward the planet's surface. His drop pods screamed through the atmosphere at speeds that would have killed most alien soldiers. But humans had evolved to survive crushing forces that would liquefy other species. "Remember, we're not here to destroy their civilization," Davis reminded his troops over the comm. "We're here to end their ability to wage war on innocent people." The Krex defenders waiting on the ground had prepared for battle against what they thought would be standard galactic infantry. They had no idea they were about to face soldiers forged by a world that had turned warfare into a science and violence into an art form. The first Krex stronghold fell within minutes. Human soldiers moved through the defensive positions like a force of nature, using tactics that the enemy couldn't comprehend. The Krex fought bravely, but they were fighting the descendants of apex predators who had spent millions of years learning to kill everything that threatened them. Emperor Gax Vel watched the battle reports with growing horror from his palace. Bunker, his greatest military commanders were being defeated by soldiers from a species he had never heard of until a few months ago. The humans fought with a casual brutality that terrified even the warlike Krex. "How many ships do they have?" Gax Vel demanded from his military advisor. "Less than 1,000, Your Majesty," replied General Vexan. "But their technology is decades ahead of ours. Worse, they fight like they expect to die and want to take as many enemies with them as possible." The Emperor struggled to understand. The Krex had built their empire by overwhelming peaceful species with superior numbers and technology. They had never faced an enemy that actually wanted to fight them. The humans seemed to relish combat in a way that chilled Krex blood. Admiral Morrison coordinated the final assault from his flagship. The human fleet had grown to over 800 ships as reinforcements, arrived from Earth. Every major power in the galaxy was watching to see how this conflict would end. "Admiral, we're receiving surrender requests from 12 Krex colonies," reported Communications Officer Lisa Park. "They're asking for terms." Morrison considered the requests. The Krex Empire was crumbling as word spread about human military capabilities. Species that had been terrorized by the Krex for centuries were rising up, knowing that the humans would protect them from retaliation. "Tell them the terms are simple," Morrison replied. "Complete disarmament of their military forces and reparations to every species they've attacked. Take it or leave it." On the planet's surface, Colonel Davis received word that Emperor Gax Vel wanted to meet with human representatives. The Krex leader had finally realized that his empire couldn't defeat an enemy that treated his homeworld's deadly environment as a pleasant vacation spot. Davis and his security team met the Emperor in the ruins of the capital city. Gax Vel was an impressive figure, standing nearly 3 meters tall with 4 arms and natural armor plating. But his eyes showed the fear of a predator that had finally met something higher on the food chain. "You have destroyed my empire," Gax Vel said, his voice carrying a mixture of rage and defeat. "What do you want from us?" "We want you to stop attacking innocent people," Davis replied simply. "That's all we ever wanted." The Emperor stared at the human colonel. "You came all this way, destroyed our fleets, conquered our worlds, just to make us stop fighting others?" "Yes." Gax Vel couldn't comprehend it. In Krex culture, warfare was about conquest and dominance. The idea of fighting just to protect strangers was completely alien to him. What kind of species fights wars to protect? People they've never met? The Emperor asked. Davis smiled grimly. The kind that evolved by protecting their families from everything that wanted to kill them. We're very good at it. The formal surrender ceremony took place aboard Admiral Morrison's flagship. Representatives from dozens of species attended, many of them former victims of Krex aggression. The galaxy was witnessing the end of one of its most brutal empires. Ambassador Helen Ward established the first permanent human embassy on Zeller Prime the following month. The gentle plant eaters who had accidentally started this war were now humanity's closest allies in space. They still couldn't quite believe that their desperate mistake had saved them. "The galaxy will never be the same," Fillmore told Ward during the embassy opening ceremony. "Your people have changed everything," Ward nodded thoughtfully. "We didn't ask for this responsibility, but when innocent people call for help, humans answer. It's who we are." Captain Scott Turner began training Zellarian Defense Forces in basic human military tactics. The peaceful species would never be warriors like humans, but they could learn to defend themselves more effectively. "The key is not to fight fair," Turner explained to his confused Zellarian students. "Fighting fair is for sports. Fighting to survive is for war." Back on Earth, President Sullivan dealt with the flood of requests for human assistance. Word had spread throughout the galaxy about the species that would travel across space to protect strangers. Every oppressed population wanted human help. "We can't police the entire galaxy," Sullivan told her advisors. "But we can make it clear that attacking innocent people will have consequences." The Terran-Zellarian Defense Pact became the foundation for a new galactic order. Other peaceful species joined the alliance, seeking protection from the Deathworlders who had proven they could defeat any aggressor. Admiral Morrison received his 100th distress call of the month as he sat in his office reviewing fleet deployments. The message was from a species called the Veltari, who were facing invasion by something called the Hegemony of Suns. "Another day, another war," Morrison muttered to himself. But he was already planning the response. Humans had accepted their role as the galaxy's protectors, a responsibility that came from being the most dangerous species anyone had ever encountered. The irony wasn't lost on him. The Zellarians had made a simple mistake when they sent their desperate message to what they thought were peaceful neighbors. Instead, they had contacted the descendants of apex predators from the most dangerous world in their local galactic region. That mistake had saved 40 billion lives and changed the course of galactic history. The universe now knew that there was a species willing and able to stand up to bullies, no matter how powerful they seemed. The Deathworlders had entered galactic politics, and peace would be maintained by the most efficient killers the galaxy had ever seen. Sometimes the wrong number was exactly the right call.